Who knows where the direction of tariff policy is going to go? If he dramatically reins them in, could be good for the economy. You'd see stocks rise, or he could go the other way and start imposing even harsher tariffs. Obviously, he instituted a 90-day pause. What he does after that's an open question. So it's kind of wait and see mode here.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by economics reporter Zach Halaschak. Zach, we are seeing some economic forecasts and some consumer confidence numbers that are a little bit troubling. Walk us through that.
Yeah, we just got the latest consumer sentiment numbers for this month, and they were troubling to say the least. They were worse than economists had sort of expected them to be. Inflation expectations, so basically what the public thinks inflation is going to look like a year from now, was at the highest level since I believe it was 1981, and that was back during when we're having the last big wave of inflation.
Right, stagflation even.
Yeah, I mean, it's even higher than the inflation expectations of the past couple years when we were peaking. So that's not a good sign. It shows that consumers are worried that prices are going to start going back up, kind of like they did a few years ago during Biden's presidency. And I think a lot of that's being driven by fears that tariffs are going to be behind this. You're hearing on the news a lot that they could see price increases. And so when consumers are kind of all thinking the same thing, it shows up in this sentiment data. Also just overall sentiment, so how consumers feel, how people feel about the economy dropped very low as well. It's also nearing, historic lows. And it just goes to show that people aren't confident that the economy is going to hold up over the next year. And we're getting these readings at the same time. You have economists and banks predicting rising risk of recession in the coming year. So it's just not really the best data to see coming in.
So one thing that people are counting on to maybe counteract the effect of the tariffs and some of the other things that have people nervous about the state of the economy is the renewal of the tax cut. But the tax bill faces a number of hurdles.
Sure.
What are they?
Yeah, I mean, there's several. Probably one of the biggest is just the whole spending cuts issue. As part of this tax package, it's extending all the 2017 Trump tax cuts, basically. And they're going to have to re-up all these because all these provisions are expiring, and they want to add other tax provisions in too. But part of that is you have fiscal conservatives, deficit hawks in the House especially, who are worried about cutting taxes even more, adding to the deficit even more. So they want to find spending cuts in other areas. So you have it's not like a hard fast rule, but they're aiming for 1.5 trillion in spending cuts as kind of an aspirational floor. And we'll see how close it gets to that. But, you also have at the same time, especially in the Senate, some more centrist Republicans who they're wary about cutting that much from the deficit because you're going to have to find places to cut that.
Right.
One of those is Medicaid cuts. You've had both House Republicans and some Senate Republicans draw the line in the sand. They didn't specifically say what it all entails, but they said we're not going to vote for something that contains significant cuts to the Medicaid program. I mean, you're hearing more ideas about like adding work requirements to that and to like food stamps, SNAP. But again, you have these fiscal conservatives who want these big cuts in the same party as people who are not wanting to cut that much out of this. So it's kind of it's going to be a give and take here for leadership in the House. And then you have other issues like the SALT cap, the state local tax deduction cap, $10,000. You have people like in high tax states, Republicans in high tax states like Mike Lawler, who are pushing for the SALT cap to be raised dramatically, even beyond just $20,000, which would be doubling it. But he introduced, I think, legislation that was like a $100,000 cap, and that was kind of, obviously, I don't think you're going to see it go up that much. It would be an enormous cost and be difficult to get the votes for that on the other side of the coin, rural Republicans. But there's definitely going to have to, again, be give and take there because he said that he won't vote for the overall package unless there is enough relief, as he calls it, SALT cap relief. And where that number is going to end up is an open question. But again, there's only such a small majority in the House that they can only afford to lose like 1 or 2 votes. It's just the math just isn't there.
So there are also some people who are concerned that the tariffs will negate some of the effect of the tax cut, whereas a lot of people are hoping it would work the other way around.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. You have these free market economists, who do not support Trump's tariffs at all. They dislike tariffs more generally speaking, have always been, free trade, that sort of thing. But they also love the tax cuts. They think the taxes should be lower, it stimulates growth, so on and so forth. So it's kind of this curious interplay here where they're hoping that some of the tax cuts will offset some of the harm done by the tariffs. But I've spoken to a few of them this past week, and they don't seem to think that the tax cuts would be enough to offset the potential damage from the tariffs, not only in revenue but also just in terms of how like GDP and
Right.
they argue basically that these tariffs are going to cause a big drag on the U.S. economy, and that extending these tax cuts and maybe adding a little bit more to the tax cuts isn't enough to drag the economy back out of that hole that the tariffs left. The caveat is all this is going to depend on how long the tariffs stay in place,
Right.
what Trump does next. We've seen how mercurial is with making tariff policy,
Right.
just kind of shooting from the hip here sometimes, or at least seemingly shooting from the hip.
Mhm.
So who knows where the direction of tariff policy is going to go. If he dramatically reins them in, could be good for the economy. You'd see stocks rise, or he could go the other way and start imposing even harsher tariffs. Obviously, he instituted a 90-day pause. What he does after that's an open question. So it's kind of wait and see mode here.
Anybody's guess. Thank you, Zach.
That's right.
You can read Zach and the rest of our policy team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.